Some phrases carry the weight of a lifetime, and sometimes it's in the shy way a child says, "No need to wash," that the silent pain of a child is hidden, invisible childhood. This is the story of Kaio, a humble boy 9 years old, who went to school every day with school uniform a little dirty, but carefully folded, like someone carrying a treasure. In the rush of the school routine, it's easy to miss the little silences. But for those who really look, like emotional teacher Diana, these silences scream. At first, she thought Kaio was just another shy child, until the day he refused help with a simplicity that broke her heart. What seemed like a simple whim, not wanting to leave the uniform to be washed, was, in fact, a gesture of solidarity coming from a place of need. Behind that "no need to wash" was Ashoka, marked by child poverty, for the dignity in the daily struggle and the desire to study, even without having the basics. This story isn't just about Kaio. It's about thousands of people, children in difficult situations, who don't ask for help because they know that help sometimes doesn't come. But when it does, it changes everything. And you'll understand how such a small gesture, a uniform, can touch the hearts of an entire school, and those of those watching too. Kaio was only 9 years old, but his gaze spoke volumes about his age. Always quiet, kind, the kind who says good morning with his eyes downcast. It was impossible not to notice that school uniform, despite being worn and a little dirty, was always neatly folded, like someone who doesn't have much but values everything they have. He didn't mingle much. He avoided conversation circles and the more heated games. When his name was called during roll call, he would raise his hand without saying anything. He was a humble boy with small but meaningful gestures, one of those students who go unnoticed if we don't really pay attention. Kaio lived with his grandmother, everyone knew that, but no one knew what the house was like. He never spoke. When asked, he'd reply with, "Everything's fine," and change the subject. He never complained about anything. He seemed more concerned with not disturbing anyone, as if silence were the way to survive in a noisy world. The most curious thing was his discipline. He arrived on time, always sat in the same chair, and completed his homework meticulously. He wasn't one to raise his hand to answer, but every letter in his notebook was written carefully. That discreet demeanor hid much more than shyness. It hid a silent fight that no one imagined. Diana was still new to school, full of enthusiasm, the kind you only see in the eyes of those who believe in the power of education. But little by little, she began to understand that teaching goes far beyond the board and chalk. She needed to learn to see what the books don't tell her, like reality in schools, where the pencil may be missing, but the sparkle in the eyes is not. She began to notice Kaio. He was too discreet, even for a shy child. But what intrigued her most was his care for school uniform. He never left it in the school's laundry rotation box, a system created to help those who couldn't wash at home. While others used it with relief, Kaio always refused. "Kaio, if you want, you can leave your uniform here and we'll wash it for you too," she once said, in the most welcoming tone possible. He replied quietly, almost as if in a secret, "No need to wash it, teacher." That polite refusal echoed in Diana's head. Was it just a uniform, or was there more to it? There, something changed. Emotional teacher, who until then had been trying to follow protocol, began to observe more closely. Kaio was not just a quiet boy. He was someone who hid, behind his kindness and silence, an exciting story, and Diana, even without knowing what it was, decided to listen more, even though the boy spoke little. The following week, Diana decided to insist once more, but cautiously. She set aside a clean uniform and wrote a loving note. "Hi, Kaio. You can leave this one for us to wash. When you get back, it'll be smelling great. With love, Professor Dai." She left the folded package on his desk quietly, as if offering it without asking for anything. Kaio looked at the package, then looked at the teacher. He said nothing. He just got up, walked to her desk, and handed her the same uniform, clean. "No need to wash it, teacher," he repeated, this time with his eyes firm, but his voice still low. It was as if that sentence were a shield, a barrier, something he couldn't allow to break. Diana felt a tightness in her chest. What had seemed like a common kindness, helping a student with his clothes, had become something of a puzzle. Why was that humble boy resisted so much? She began to understand that behind that answer there was something much bigger. A strong child who would rather refuse help than lose his dignity. That's when the teacher decided to change her approach. She no longer insisted. She simply observed. She began to mentally record every gesture, every detail. And in the midst of it all, she understood that sometimes a simple no can mean, I want to keep trying on my own. Or perhaps, it's all I have. I can't risk losing it. In physical education class, Kaio's absence began to attract attention. He always found an excuse not to participate. He'd say he had a headache, forget his sneakers, or simply disappear to the library. But the truth was different. He didn't want to take off his shoes. Not there, not anywhere. Even on the hottest days, when his classmates ran around the playground sweating and laughing, Kaio kept his sneakers tied tightly, as if taking them off would expose a secret. Some students started laughing, making silly jokes. Kaio has smelly feet, or are you afraid to show your big toe? Diana always scolded him, but he never responded. He just lowered his head. That reaction hurt more than crying. The boy didn't defend himself, didn't fight, didn't complain. It was as if he was already used to hiding, to being invisible. Here was clear proof of a poverty and dignity who walked side by side. He didn't want pity, he just didn't want to be embarrassed. The teacher began to understand that Kaio's attitude wasn't apathy, it was protection, a way of preserving what little he had. Silent fight, daily. And there, without even saying a word, he taught about something that the school didn't yet include in the curriculum: respect for the pain that cannot be seen. Over the next few weeks, Diana began to notice a pattern. Kaio didn't eat his entire snack at recess. He'd carefully tuck some away, always wrapped in a napkin. And it wasn't for lack of appetite, it was out of necessity. Something in those small gestures revealed that child, in difficult situation, carried the weight of the house on his shoulders. One day, while helping students with their science homework, Diana accidentally bumped into Kaio's backpack and saw a hidden package. Inside were carefully packed school snack cookies. He noticed the teacher's gaze and, with teary eyes, whispered, "Sorry, teacher. It's for my little brother." She was silent for a few seconds. That answer dismantled any stiffness she might have had. It wasn't robbery, it was gesture of solidarity, the kind we learn from those who have little but think of others. A boy who barely had enough to eat and yet cared about those who had even less. It was at that moment that Diana realized that Kaio was not just another quiet student. He was a living example of child overcoming one, of those little giants who learned to be strong too soon. She wanted to hug him right then and there, but she knew she needed to go deeper, to understand where such maturity came from at such a young age. Diana couldn't sleep peacefully anymore. The image of Kaio saving cookies for his little brother kept playing in her head. She decided to do what few teachers dare: visit the student's home. She discreetly asked the secretary for the address and, on a free afternoon, went there. Heart heavy, steps slow. Upon arriving, he found a side entrance to a simple lot at the back of a larger house. There, a crooked wooden door and a curtain for a window revealed improvised housing. He knocked gently. The person who answered was Donna Lucia, Kaio's grandmother, a soft-spoken woman with very clean clothes, but visibly worn with age. "Come in, teacher. Sorry about the mess." The space was cramped, but well kept. An old stove, clean pots, makeshift toys, and 3 mattresses on the floor. Kaio slept on one of them, along with 2 younger brothers. Nothing was comfortable there, but there was a kind of quiet dignity that moved more than any words. Diana took a deep breath. That was confirmation of everything she had been feeling. Reality in schools goes far beyond what the bulletin shows. There was an invisible childhood, the kind that doesn't appear in statistics, but hides in the eyes of those who have seen too much for such a young age. And all of that was starting to make more sense now. While Caio played with his brothers in the dirt area, Diana sat with Donna Lucia in the small kitchen. They drank coffee from old glass cups, the kind with cracks in the bottom. The conversation was shy at first, but a single compliment to her grandson made the grandmother's eyes light up and also fill with exhaustion. Diana asked carefully about the uniform. Donna Lucia sighed deeply before answering. "It's just that he only has one, my dear. We wash it at night when he sleeps. If it gets wet during the day, he won't have another one to wear to school." The sentence came like a blow. It explained everything: the silence, the refusal, the resistance to accepting help. That's why Caio said he didn't need to wash. It wasn't pride. It was fear of not having enough to wear to class the next day. A simple but profound fear that only those who live through its social inequality understand. The boy didn't want to be different. He just wanted to continue studying without attracting attention, without embarrassment. At that moment, Diana understood that Caio was not just a strong child. He was also a child who teaches. The boy didn't want pity. He wanted dignity, even when everything around him seemed to want to take that away from him. And there, on that cement floor, a new kind of commitment to her students was born within the teacher. On the way home, Diana couldn't hold back her tears. She parked the car and cried right there at the steering wheel. It wasn't just sadness. It was a mix of guilt, compassion, and admiration. She had trained to teach, but there she realized that those who learn the most are those who have the courage to listen to what isn't said. Caio had taught without uttering a single lesson. For years, she thought that very quiet students were simply disinterested, but now she understood that sometimes silence hides the loudest of pains. A boy who spared even his words so as not to disturb. Because even that, he measured. Diana began to reconsider her view, not only of Caio, but of all the too quiet ones. She began to rethink her practices, her assessments, her judgments. How many moving stories would she have ignored it by not looking beyond the surface? The child poverty, it doesn't always appear with requests for help. Often, it comes disguised as good behavior, a constant presence, and polite silence. It was in this reflection that Diana found a new purpose. More than teaching math or grammar, she wanted to see, she wanted to embrace. Because in the end, what schools really need isn't just grades, it's humanity. And Caio, with his uniform washed at night and his heart clean, was the best teacher she could have. The next day, Diana entered the teacher's lounge with a new sparkle in her eyes and a mission in her heart. She gathered her classmates and told the story carefully, without naming names. She explained that some students hid their need out of shame, and she proposed something simple but powerful: a discreet donation campaign, donated uniforms, footwear, and hygiene items. At first, there was silence. Some teachers just nodded, others swallowed hard. But all it took was a colleague remembering a similar case for everyone to understand that this initiative was more than urgent. It was necessary. Within a few days, lovingly assembled kits began arriving: ironed clothes, sneakers in good condition, soap, toothbrushes. The principal authorized the creation of a care corner, hidden from view, where students could freely retrieve items. No tokens, no displays. Everything was anonymous and respectful. This was the school becoming what it should always be, a place of welcome and dignity, where poverty and dignity can coexist without shame. Diana delicately prepared Caio's new uniform. She folded it carefully, put it in a little bag, and handed it to him along with a phrase she'd made up on the spot. It was a gift from the school for those who study hard. He accepted it with a shy but sincere smile. For the first time, that humble boy seemed to understand that he was seen and valued. With his new uniform on, Caio entered the classroom looking different. He didn't speak louder. He didn't become popular. But there was something in the way he walked, the way he sat, a lightness. It was as if, finally, he could just be a student, without having to hide anything. This was more than new material. It was respect. It was freedom. Diana watched from afar. She knew that gesture had touched a chord, not just with Caio, but with many others. The donation campaign began to transform the school routine. Teachers, parents, and even students began to view their classmates differently. New conversations emerged, fewer jokes, more empathy, an atmosphere of care never before seen. And it all started with a uniform. A simple item, but one that revealed a lot about their reality in school's Caio, who had previously avoided the playground, now participated in physical education classes. Still shy, of course, but present. The boy who had walked hunched over now walked with his shoulders a little more open. There was no party, no announcement. Everything was low-key, just the way he preferred. But the smile on Caio's face that day said it all. And for Diana, that was the greatest recognition she could receive, because sometimes children's overcoming doesn't come with trophies. It comes with a look of silent gratitude. And that, yes, changes everything. At the end of the quarter, each student was asked to write a short text to present to the class. Most talked about games, dreams, or favorite characters. Caio, as always, submitted his silently. He didn't ask to read it. But Diana, sensitively, gently asked him, "Would you like to share yours with the class?" He hesitated, looked at his classmates, then at the floor, and decided to read. In a low but firm voice he began, "Our clothes may be dirty, but a clean heart is what matters." The room fell silent. It wasn't just the phrase, it was the weight of it. It was everything he'd experienced, expressed in one simple line. A true manifesto of someone who lives the dignity in poverty. His classmates, previously so distracted, were now attentive. Some swallowed hard, others smiled with teary eyes. And when Caio finished, the applause came. At first, timid, then loud, even standing. Diana, trying to hold back tears, felt that this moment wasn't just about the boy. It was about everything he represented. There, in that common room, an exciting story had touched each one. And in that moment, Caio stopped being the quiet student in the back. He became a symbol of resistance, of tenderness, of strength. A humble boy, yes, but with an immense soul, and with the rare courage to teach, even without ever having been invited to speak. We never know what silence holds. There are children who speak little, but teach a lot. Caio never asked for anything. He never begged for help. He just wanted to study, go to school with his school uniform clean, even if it meant washing it at night, waiting to dry next to the mattress, and leaving early with the same care as always. Behind that polite refusal, "No need to wash, teacher," was a whole world of pain, effort, and dignity. He wasn't rejecting the help out of pride. He simply wanted to hold on to what he still had, the right to not look different. And it was precisely this silent strength that most touched those with the attentive heart to see it. Diana, her colleagues, the students, everyone was transformed by that strong child. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about all this is realizing that, in a small gesture, a revolution was born. Not the kind that appears in the newspaper, but the kind that changes the way we see each other. Ashoka, which shows that affection, when combined with action, can change destinies. And now I ask you, how many Caios pass by us every day without us noticing? Have you ever been touched by a gesture like this? Have you ever met someone who, with little, taught you a lot? Tell us in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire, and they really play.